Hey folks, how you doing? This is the daily update for what's going on in Europe with the war between the Ukraine and Russia and other crazy hotspots and parts of the world as well. This is your video and your little daily nudge to make sure that you're living your life, having as much fun as humanly possible, but also taking 30 to 60 minutes a day to prepare for the absolute worst case doomsday scenario, which seems to be on the horizon perpetually for us these days. So I'm going to start off today with a little bit of good news. Yesterday we talked about Bangladesh being completely without power, but the power has come back on. So some really nice moody photos here of these people in their local market there, but they had to use candles. It's probably all right for a day, an afternoon, or an evening, which is what these people went through. But I'm certain if that went on for a period of time, all of that stock would spoil over time and cause all sorts of grief for these people as well. So here's another picture of a couple of people trying to get about their life despite the power going off. And remember, so it went off from 2 o'clock till 9 o'clock, so an afternoon and an evening for inconvenience. It's just interesting to look at it and see what happened to a nation, to an entire country of 100 plus million people, 138 million people I think are in Bangladesh. It's interesting to see what happened when the power off and how they went off and how they reacted, because if a super EMP weapon goes off and we have a nuclear exchange between Russia and the US and NATO, or we have a nuclear exchange between China or North Korea or something like that, the power is going to go off. And you're not going to see any destructive effects of a nuclear weapon because it doesn't have destructive effects. It turns the power off. The electromagnetic pulse destroys the high voltage transformers at the substations, and it kills the power at its source, and that has all sorts of cascading effects for us. So it's interesting to see people's reaction. Everyone was pretty calm and life was pretty normal. The shops closed up and people went home, and some of the reporting there just shows that these people were able to handle that with the resilience and poise that you would expect of an inconvenience, which is really what it was. But it's a window into something that might unfold in the next couple of weeks for us here on planet Earth, because it's pretty scary. I'm certain that these people here serving food in their restaurant are not going to be serving food in their restaurant 5 days into the blackout. It won't take very long for all of business to stop and for society to completely come undone. So just when you're thinking about your daily prep and when you're doing something on a daily basis, make sure you're preparing for the worst case scenario, which is the power going out. You're going to need water, because if there's no electricity and there's no pumps for the water that's in your house, what are you actually going to do for water? You need a way to actually gather water, collect water, so you need some sort of collection device. You probably got something in your kitchen, but not at scale or enough. And then you need a water point, but then you also need to have some on hand as well in the event that that goes on. So I want you to think about that as you're preparing and doing your daily prep as well. All right, we've had a shift in gears from the Taiwanese government, and there's not a lot of news to report out of Ukraine and out of Russia. I could show you a bunch of videos of dead Russian soldiers and dead Ukrainian soldiers from the different Telegram groups that I'm part of, but really, as far as news that's coming out of there, is it making much difference to me for me sharing that with you? No, not today, it's not. So this is probably the biggest piece of news that I've got for you today, is that Taiwan says that they will fight back if China crosses the red line, their defense minister says. So this is really the first time these folks have been talking about that. So Taiwan's defense minister on Wednesday, that's yesterday, said that China has already destroyed the median line. So the median line is the geographical center line that the Chinese and Taiwanese have drawn in the Taiwan Strait. So there's a body of water there. They just draw a line in the middle. And what they've said is if the Chinese cross that, the Taiwanese are going to counterattack. So for the first time, they've said that. For the first time that they said that they're going to counterattack. They've had enough of all of the probing and the prodding. And so the concept that the Chinese are using, their navy and their air force is so much bigger than the Taiwanese. And every country on planet Earth has a thing called an air defense interception zone, an ADIZ. So the ADIZ is a geographical part of their airspace, and if aircraft cross into that ADIZ and they're not identified, then that given country will scramble their air force to go and intercept those aircraft to see exactly who they are. So one of the concepts that the Chinese have been using for a long time is just to wear down the Taiwanese Air Force. So as you probably know, that fighter jets or aircraft or machines of any type take an incredible amount of maintenance. And this is the reason that militaries cost so much money, right? So for every hour that they fly one of these jets, there's probably 6 to 10 hours worth of maintenance that's actually required. Unless you've got something super modern like an F-35 or a Super Hornet or a Eurofighter or something like that, for every hour you fly, you probably only need 2 or 3 hours worth of maintenance. So it's not as much, it's not as labor intensive. And what the Chinese do is on a daily basis, they said aircraft, maybe 1 or 2, sometimes 20 or 30, sometimes large force exercises that they're sending across to the ADIZ, and then the whole Taiwanese Air Force has to go and launch to intercept them. And over a period of time, they're wearing down their Air Force and causing all sorts of maintenance issues for them, which is reducing the serviceability of the Taiwanese Air Force, which is going to make it easier for the Chinese to come forth when they decide to invade over a period of time. So are the Chinese poised to invade Taiwan? No, not right now. Are the Taiwanese going to fire back at them? Well, according to this article and according to what the Taiwanese Minister for Defense is saying, yes, they are. They've had enough of the probing and the prodding, and they've had enough of all the Chinese BS that's going on. So it might be that Taiwan is the country that kicks off the war in the South China Sea, not China. So if they fire back at them, are the Chinese going to retaliate in a tit-for-tat scenario? Well, they may very well do that, but if they're not ready and locked and loaded to actually get across the strait there and do their airborne assault or their landing or however they're going to get Chinese troops ashore in Taiwan, then I think it would be a tit-for-tat escalation. But that could escalate into something pretty serious really quickly because the Americans are going to come to the Taiwanese rescue, and it's going to get really heated really, really fast as well. And who knows where that's actually going to go. That's not a scenario that's been gamed out very much by the mainstream, but we know the Taiwanese have got pretty extensive capability, offensive capability as well as defensive. All right, I want to shift gears into North Korea here because we know that they fired a missile yesterday over Japan, and that was all very alarming. It's the longest missile test that they've done before. They didn't fire this missile. This is just a photo I pulled from Google, but it's a pretty serious bit of kit, right? It's actually a rocket that goes into space. So space is hard to be able to accelerate fast enough to get outside the Earth's atmosphere and then fire a trajectory across. That's what a ballistic missile is, and to get that warhead on a target. It's a pretty incredible technological feat that the North Koreans have been able to do, and they've done it at the expense of their population, of starving everybody and this totalitarian evil regime that they actually have. The interesting part about this picture for me is this truck. The North Koreans didn't get that truck. They didn't make that truck. It comes from China. The Chinese give them all this technology. They share the technology. The Russians share the technology with them as well. So we saw this happen just a day or two ago. So I think it's 2 days ago now. And we've seen that the North Koreans have launched 32 ballistic missiles this year. Now, is that a normal thing for a country to practice and launch that many missiles? I would suggest to you, no, it's not. The amount of times that the Americans test their missile systems is maybe a couple of times per year at most, when they test the Minuteman III systems and they fire from Vandenberg Air Base in on the west coast, and they're firing it into the Pacific Ocean. Even the Russians, how often are they testing ballistic missiles? Yeah, they're doing it. They're definitely doing it, but how frequent is that actually happening? It's not as frequent as you think. It's certainly not 22 times a year. And what are we in October? We've got 2 months to run in the year. A lot of analysts out there are saying that Kim, that is, he is moving towards the next nuclear test. So you may or may not know, but he's done 6 nuclear tests so far. I made a mistake in the video yesterday and said it was 5. He's done 6 in 2006, 9, 13, twice in 16, and then 1 in 2017. So is he preparing for another nuclear test? I believe that this is the flashpoint for World War III. I believe if North Korea does another nuclear test, an above-ground nuclear test, that is, or they engage with South Korea and they draw all of the Allied forces into that part of the world, the Chinese will have a go at Taiwan because they'll be overstretched, the Allies, that is, and no more activity is going to be happening in the Ukraine. We can't fight 2 wars on 2 fronts. And then I think you'll find that the Israelis go after the Iranian nuclear facilities all at the same time. That's what I mean by this blowing up into World War III and escalating really, really quickly. So It's just another article about the North Koreans and how many missiles they've fired. If you don't know, that's what their radius is. So they fired just the other day from the northeastern part of Korea here, and it landed on the eastern part of Japan, probably around where that green line is. So they're testing. So why do countries do this? Well, what they're looking for is they're looking for telemetry about what their actual missile systems are doing. When I was in the Royal Australian Navy, we fired a bunch of missiles while I was there for 5 years. There's probably, on average, 1, maybe 2 per year. We didn't do it very often because the things cost a lot of money. We're only a small defense force, and there's not a lot of reason to actually fire these things other than to prepare to go on an operation and to do something. So they were the times that I did it. So the warships that I was on was an Oliver Hazard Perry class guided missile frigate. I was on HMAS Melbourne, and we had standard missile 1, so SM-1, and we also had Harpoon as well. I never got to have a war shot of a Harpoon, but I did fire several SM-1 missiles. Certainly not 32 SM-1 missiles in 1 year like the North Koreans have. Our military definitely, our Navy, when I was in the Navy, definitely didn't fire 32 missiles in 1 year. If anything, we had a couple of warships steaming along and firing at a target all at the same time. And I think maybe the max that we had there at once was like 4 ships. And 4 ships would fire a missile at the towed targets all at once like that. So, 4 missiles twice a year. We shot 8 standard surface-to-air missiles like that. It's not a lot in a year, and that's across 4 different platforms as well. So to consider that they're firing 32 missiles in just 10 months of the year, that seems like a high level of activity, and it seems like it maybe is moving towards something that we think is maybe a little bit more nefarious. So when they're firing these things, they're gathering a whole lot of telemetry, and we're doing the same thing as well, right? So we know when they fire those ballistic missiles, space-based infrared can see when they launch. All of the alert systems here in Japan and this part of the world, and where there's warships and aircraft operating in this part of the world, we can detect all of those launches and see all of the information. We can see the trajectory, we can see the re-entries, we can see all of that stuff with our radar system. So it's an absolute gold mine, a treasure trove of intel on their weapon systems that we're gathering when they do that. And when they do that, we gather the info and we know how to beat them. So that's all pretty interesting, but equally, it's all very interesting for them as well, and the North Koreans, I mean, by them. So they're gathering all the same data, and they're gathering all the same telemetry to figure out how to improve their systems, to figure out what's broken and what they need to do to keep moving it forward. So you can see here that they've threatened Guam many times. They've threatened Hawaii as well. Remember a couple of years ago, there was a text message that went out to everybody saying that the world was about to end. They were about to be nuked. Their systems can reach that far. I'd suggest to you that their systems can reach a little bit further nowadays. This is a graphic I found online from 2016 from this website. It's a little bit old, so I think you'll find the updated graphic will see that it covers the entire planet Earth, because once you get the missile outside of the atmosphere and get the ballistic trajectory going, it will be able to hit mainland United States. But that's a little bit of a moot point, and I'll show you why in a second. The reason this is such a problem is because of the EMP threat that it actually poses. And I'm going to show you something pretty sinister in here. So this document's written by Dr. Peter Pry, who passed away recently, unfortunately, so he'll be sadly missed. But over the years, he's written like dozens and dozens of these types of documents, and they're really worth looking at because we're on the precipice of a nuclear war, so it pays to actually educate yourself and find out some more information about these things. So do North Koreans have satellites in space? The answer is yes. This tab right here, I'll show you that in a sec. So any of the North Korean ICBMs, so meaning this is an ICBM, on their space launch vehicles could probably deliver a super EMP warhead to the United States. And I'll show you exactly how in a sec. North Korea orbited a satellite weighing about 100 kilograms. One design of a super EMP warhead would be a modified neutron bomb, more accurately, an enhanced radiation warhead, because it produces not only lots of neutrons, but all kinds of radiation, including lots of gamma rays. So gamma rays cause the E1 high altitude EMP effect. So that's what HEMP means. So this is the type of weapon system that it is, E1 HEMP effect. One US ERW warhead, the W-82, deployed in NATO during the Cold War, weighed less than 50 kilograms. So the satellite that I'm about to show you weighs 100 kilograms, so that's why they think it might be a super EMP weapon. Since the EMP attack entails detonating the warhead at high altitude above the atmosphere, the warhead doesn't even need a re-entry vehicle. So all they do is they put the nuke on the end of the missile here, on the end of the rocket, and they put that into orbit, and then they can detonate it. So just down the bottom here, the trajectory of the North Korean satellite launched on December 12, 2012 looked very much like a fractional orbital bombardment system for an EMP attack. So this is, if you cast your mind back to the 1980s, this is what we talked about in the Star Wars program when we're going to weaponize space. But there was all sorts of treaties to stop that from actually happening. But the reality is we have weaponized space. The Chinese have weaponized space, but nobody really knows, except those countries and people that have access to that, how those weapon systems operate. I'll show you how the North Korean one operates in a sec, because we do know that. The space launch vehicle flew southward away from the United States and sent the satellite over the South Polar region, approaching the US from the unprotected south at the optimum altitude for a HEMP attack, and would place all 48 contiguous United States under the EMP field, or the electric field. North Korea now appears to be armed with a FOBS capability to attack the United States. I bet you didn't know that. Or any other nation on Earth for that matter, with a super EMP weapon. So this is the satellite, and I'll link it down below here for you. Let me just reload that to make sure it's actually the right location of where it is. So you can see all of this information at this link down below, and you can see the trajectory of the actual satellite there. So see how it's tracking this way here. If I draw the footprint, so here it is right over the top of Europe. If Kim Jong-un, good morning Pyongyang, decided to press the big fat red button on his desk today, he would knock out this much of Europe. That's what the EMP would destroy. It would destroy all of Europe. And when you look at the thing, it's at 439 kilometers of altitude, and we believe this is a super EMP weapon. So when I scale that out onto a large map, you can see how, as it's coming down with its trajectory, it's coming back up here. So when you look at North America, if I just move out of the way, I'll move on this side. If you look at North America, all of the defense systems facing over here. So they're facing the Pacific Ocean, like in this, I guess, this kind of square that I'm drawing with my mouse. That's where it's coming from. And they're also looking over the polar regions as well. So looking back up this way of planet Earth. So if the Russians are going to fire a missile, it's going to come over the top of the North Pole, like this, over the top of Greenland, and it's going to come into the United States that way. So all of the weapon systems are facing that way, all the defensive systems. So the North Koreans have fired the satellite so it can track in a southerly direction. It's coming up this way, where none of the early warning systems are pointed to the south looking at it. So you can see there that it's a pretty devastating thing. Just one satellite, one potential nuclear weapon sitting in space could wipe out all of Europe in one foul swoop. It's a pretty scary proposition. So the sinister part to all of this is nobody really knows what that satellite is. People have suggested that it's a weather satellite, it's an observation satellite, it's a communication satellite. The North Koreans say it's a weather satellite. But here's the sinister part, folks. This thing has been in play since 2012. And if you look at when they acquired nukes, 2006, 2009. So right here in the guts of this number there where the cursor is, that's where they launched. And put that satellite in space there, 2012. So it's plausible that this is a super EMP weapon. The timing fits, the timeline fits. And the sinister part about all of this, folks, is that this satellite, apparently it's a weather satellite, has never transmitted. So that means one of two things. It could be two possible things. Either the satellite is faulty and the transmitter's not working, and it's not transmitting anything, or it's something else. What that something else is, who knows? Is that a super EMP weapon? Is it just a faulty satellite? Is it something that's not working? Nobody really knows. The only people that really know are the North Koreans and probably the Americans, who can see exactly what that is. So you can see it with some optical instruments, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know exactly what it is. Could we take that satellite out? Yes, we have anti-satellite missile capability from down the bottom here on planet Earth. We can fly a jet up, fire a missile at it, but as you can see how fast the thing is moving, it's a pretty difficult proposition to actually make that work. The Russians have also got an anti-satellite capability, and that's something that was proven recently. Just I think it was the end of 2020, just before 2021, they did that, and all the debris from the satellite that they destroyed got in the path of the space station, and they had to move the space station out of the way so it didn't get damaged. Anyway, folks, this is some pretty serious stuff going on with North Korea right now. We've got a shifting gears from Taiwan and their policy. That's something that's very new. And we have absolutely no real news to report out of the Ukraine or out of Russia. And I guess no news in some way is good news. But the battle continues and the fighting is not done yet. We've got a long way to run in these conflicts, and some of these new conflicts are about to open up as well. Make sure you're doing your preparation work. Make sure you're out there having a good time, providing for your family. You're enjoying your life, you're living your life. All of this doom and gloom stuff will get you down, okay? Just give it a little bit of attention each day. Don't spend hours and hours on this stuff. There's no need to do that. Do what you can to prepare. Stock your fridge, stock your pantry, and make sure that you are ready. Make sure that you've got what you need in the event the worst case scenario happens. All right, that wraps it up for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.